us enough confidence that collaboration is the new normal, and thanks to the technology and the digitization, everyone was swift to adapt to digitization, and so many of our incubators were there who could really enhance their reach to many startups, innovators across the country. And now hybrid model in incubation has become a new norm, a mix of both virtual and physical, and that's how we also quickly adopted to this new normal and have really modified and revised our guidelines, where we are permitting virtual incubation also as a part of, where virtual incubators also will be the recipient of our funding programs, which otherwise in pre-pandemic times were restricted largely to the physical incubators. So everyone has to adopt to the new changing circumstances, and since this we have to live with it, and as per the report goes, this to further normalize the situation and bring back to the pre-pandemic times, it will take another 2 years or so, and certain things are now going to stay, like hybrid model is going to stay. Adopt, we have to totally bank on technology as the new normal, so this is not going to change, and sooner the better is going to really make a dent on your success stories. So I think going forward, what incubation as a potent tool for supporting startups have to adopt to the new, to be relevant, agile, and resilient. So that model, how you really could churn out newer services, because there is a visible dip in the physical services. So how do you really take charge of the current situation, yet be relevant, yet be providing value-added services, and also I must share, now we have seen, I think every month, or we have 4 or 5 success stories which are coming from the incubated startups. So that is a really, because today is the time where it is the time of startups, and as you know, DPIIT has also rolled out a new scheme for supporting startup seed support, where it will be rolled out through incubators. So incubators and startups are going to be the new pillars of a new age economic progress of our country. And all virtually, I think 6-7 departments have rolled out their incubation program, startup supporting program. So I would urge upon Mr. Gopalakrishnan being part of the CII, because many of our public-private partnerships, which were really very successful in the pre-pandemic times, have really are actually are being held back by the various public private players. So how can we really now engage with industry? Because without industry, without getting the real market insights and their engagement, the journey will be very longer, and it will not be easier path to navigate and travel. So we could work out like how we have been partnering with FICCI to some extent. I think CII is a part of the Gita kind of initiative. But we would like to explore newer models of engagement, which could also serve our startups and incubators to come out with larger, bigger value-added services. Because I see one of the missing pieces in our incubation portfolio is really getting the paid pilots or getting the products validated at the industry level. So if that could be thought of and could be added, this would be huge value add from the incubator side, and DST will be keen to be onboarding such kind of programs with any industry. And another message is to incubator is to really create a niche. So other generic incubation is over, you have to create a niche. What sector you will be focusing on? Because I see each of the incubators a national incubator. So that aspiration has to be built up. You are not serving only a smaller region, because virtual and technology has now made it you available to target startups across pan-India, across the country. So with those words, once again, a hearty welcome to Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan. And we are all keen to actually hear out your words of wisdom, your insights, and I think all will be enlightened with your share of thoughts. So thank you, and thank you, Isma, for this wonderful series, leadership series, which is so desired, and to bring that kind of qualities on incubation management as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And still, we remember the proactiveness that NSTGB has shown when the COVID issue started. And we have been associating, ISBA has been associating with the DST's initiatives. And thanks for the confidence that you have with the members. And as ma'am mentioned, sir, we thought of how to evolve new model. Then the name distributed incubator network evolved. And then we had about 2 or 3 rounds of deliberations last year by July, August, September. And we identified 4 models where each incubator center can leverage. We named it, earlier we know only the virtual incubation, then the co-incubation came, hub and spoke model, hybrid model. So ISBA is now coming out with a concept note on the distributed incubator network. The draft is ready, and in next 1 week or 10 days, we'll be publishing a paper on distributed network model. So that there will be more chances for the incubation centers to come together to share the resources, and that will give a value addition for the startups also. So that's one kind of what to say, the next incubation ecosystem that we are trying to build up in the next 1 or 2 years. So thank you very much, ma'am, and sir, over to you, and we look forward to your thoughts.
Thank you, Suresh and Dr. Anita Gupta. It's always a pleasure to share the stage with you. And you know, DST has been in the forefront of working with academic institutions to promote incubation, startups, innovation in general, and the results are clearly visible. And as you rightly mentioned, this became a model for us to take forward. What I'm mentioning here is how during the pandemic, all the players came together to address the issue of taking what products that you have, services you have, and repositioning it, actually repurposing it for the pandemic. One wonderful example of this is the ventilator project, which was one of the anchors was the IIT Kanpur team. Before the pandemic, India was not manufacturing any of the ventilators. And suddenly we realized during the pandemic that, the demand for ventilators went up, but globally also the demand went up. That means, India did not get its share of ventilators, and all the players, with Department of Science and Technology, with some of the startups, IIT Kanpur, the Defense Department, all of them came together, DRDO, all of them came together and created prototypes, started manufacturing, and fast forward today, India is self-sufficient on ventilators, is exporting ventilators now to other countries. And that's a wonderful example of how the challenge has become a opportunity, and we took advantage of that. So let me share my screen at this point, and I will talk about some of the thoughts around how to manage during uncertainty and the challenges and opportunities in the business incubation arena. And I want to thank ISBA. I want to thank the National Science and Technology Entrepreneurship Development Board for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. I hope all of you can see my screen. Okay, I'm assuming that all of you can.
Yes, sir, we are able to see.
Yeah, see the screen. So to set the stage, briefly, let me talk about what an incubator is to me. First of all, the incubator has to be a sustainable entity. It has to be there for the long term, and I'll come back to this. But an incubator is a catalyst for economic development. If you truly believe that startups are the ones that are going to bring innovation to market, startups are the ones that are going to create new economic activity, bring faster growth. So the incubator is the catalyst for the economic development. And you can provide these services that startups require in a concentrated manner rather than distributed across. It provides workspace, does technologies, common facilities. It provides training, mentoring, including peer learning, because that's an ecosystem with other startups. Access to network of successful entrepreneurs, that's very important. Um, Access to and help in getting startup resources like talent, go-to-market support, shared services, government support, again, very important. And shared equipment and lab facilities when it comes to maybe startups in the manufacturing space, startups in the biotech space and things like that. Access to funding and accelerator programs, that allow the startup to grow faster. So what then are the metrics that you will use to look at the success of an incubator? And there are three sets actually. One are what I would call operational or input matrices. Improve the odds of success of a new business, reduce non-mistakes by new business, how many VCs are part of the network, how many startup founders you have, how many mentors you have, how many startups you have. So these are all operational metrics. Then you have some outcome matrices, amount of funds raised by the startups, number of startups graduating to the next round, number of jobs created by the incubator, by startups themselves, the survival rate of graduates from the incubator, etc. So these are outcome matrices. And then there are two which are about the incubator itself. Is it a sustainable entity? Can it generate income sufficient enough to continue its operations without additional funding? To me, this is very important. See, some of the incubators are for-profit entities, but many are actually not-for-profit entities. But not-for-profit entity does not mean that you don't make profit. It means that you don't distribute profits, right? Because it is by recycling the profits that you become a sustainable entity. You don't distribute the profits, but you invest the profits back into the incubator in order to provide better facilities, in order to provide new facilities, in order to maybe give grants to startups, in order to provide the translational resources that are required to take a idea from lab to market. So there are many things that an incubator can do if it has actually enough funding, enough resources and things like that. And that's why becoming a sustainable entity is a very important measure of the success of an incubator. And longevity of the incubator. It's also very important that the knowledge that is gained, the experiences that are gained by the incubator, the brand that it creates, its graduates, all of those are very important to create a positive spiral in the incubator space, to create a ecosystem that is a virtuous cycle. And longevity of the incubator is very important when it comes to measuring the success of an incubator. And here, I'm happy to say that when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to longevity, again, DST and Government of India has been very, very proactive in supporting incubators, supporting startups through incubators and things like that. Now, let's look at what is happening today. And this quote attributed to Mike Tyson is one which I like very much because it aptly describes what has happened, right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Then all the plans just get thrown out of the boxing ring, right? You have to then fight on your toes. You have to innovate, you have to become creative and things like that. You just don't have any option but to think creatively, think innovatively when there are no other options. And this COVID-19 pandemic is an example of a black swan event. Nobody thought it would happen. Nobody predicted it. Some people did mention it, but they didn't tell us, when it will happen, how it will happen, how long it will be, etc. And so all of us were caught surprised. We were unprepared for it, and that's exactly what a black swan event is actually. The financial crisis of 2008 is another example of a black swan event. It impacted primarily the financial sector, but those industries that were dependent on the financial sector were also impacted. And so companies like Infosys, Wipro, TCS, the IT services companies whose income, significant part of their income, approximately 45% of the income for the IT services companies come from the financial services sector, and they were impacted during the financial crisis. But more importantly, what we need to remember, and this is very, very important, what we need to remember is that we are going to see unusual events more and more, unfortunately. Cyber security related events are increasing as our life becomes more and more digital. As we speak right now, there's a ransomware attack that is happening. You may have read in the papers about events related to the pipeline in the oil pipeline in the US, which was shut down because of ransomware attack. There are many cybersecurity related events that are happening, and all over the world. It's just not US, India, everywhere. The second is biological catastrophe. See, the vaccine is created by engineering the RNA, the messenger RNA, and these two of the vaccines are mRNA vaccines, which means that now we can program the RNA to specific to create specific proteins, and that's injected into the human body, and it creates the immune response. Now, this can be actually misused also. So it is actually very, very easy and simple today to actually create biological attacks and things like that. There is also the suspicion that maybe this pandemic is also created in the lab, right? So, we will see increased biological attacks and things like that. Financial inflation is a challenge, and when we have runaway inflation, it is possible that the value of the currency goes down, and that impacts industry very badly. Climate related, we are seeing the largest wildfires, the largest floods and things like that all over the world. Again, not restricted to India. We are seeing that in developed countries. We are seeing that in developing countries. Geopolitical events, when conflicts occur and things like that. Basically, what I'm saying is that, though these are called rare events, when you look at all the rare events that are happening around, and there probably are more that you can think of, we should get prepared for unusual events going forward. And if you think about it, if you take the incubator as an organization, if you take a startup as an organization, there are more things which are out of your control than things within your control, because the external world is vast. The external world is a globalized world. The external world has too many moving parts, and you know that you cannot control things outside your organization, very little that you can control. Working together, maybe we can take control of little bit more, but even at the state level, you find that there are many things that are beyond your control, and hence we need to prepare ourselves, and that's what I want to now talk about. And I want to talk about this in the two headings: resilience and robustness. And I'll talk about this in the next two slides, actually. So the crisis uh, really tests us. We will learn what we can do much better, doing more with less, completely change our path, understand who our true friends are, and show to the rest of the world that we can take advantage of the crisis and emerge stronger, resilient. This is what I define as resilience. Resilience is a trait that is used to face challenges or crisis in life and adapt and emerge stronger. And the key word here is it's not adapt and survive. That's what normally you would think of resilience as adapt and survive. I think that the trait that we want is adapt and thrive. And that to me is the key word here. How can we adapt and thrive? And I've got here various examples. See, within a short period of actually about a month, see the DNA sequence of the virus was published around March of 2020. By end of April 2020, actually the vaccine was ready for human trials. Never before in the history of the world that a vaccine was developed in such a short period of time. But most important thing to remember, and if you look back into the history of this vaccine, mRNA vaccine, this was in the works from 1970 onwards. And the people involved in it had been working, they were ignored, then there was some attention paid to them, but people didn't believe them. And slowly, they continued, they believed in the technology, and then developed this technology further, developed a mechanism to inject these vaccines into the body without creating an immune response and things like that. And because of that hard work, because of all that, and finally, the government also supported. You will find that in 2008, the DARPA in the US actually saw that this could have potential benefits and things like that, and pumped in $25 million to develop this vaccine. At that point, Moderna, it seems, had only 3 employees. It was just a startup at that point, and the government gave it $25 million. Very similar to what DST, DBT are all doing here in India today. But they supported this, and when the pandemic struck, they could develop a vaccine within no time. And this technology is now going to completely transform healthcare over the next several years. The next 30 years are going to be, I think, an amazing period for healthcare, because lots and lots of innovations. And I hope and I believe that we will be able to find cures for most of the cancers. We'll be able to find even treatment for diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, etc. We have actually kicked off an amazing period of innovation in the healthcare area. Again, it's a clear example of how being at the right place at the right time and repurposing what you have to to provide a solution, and taking advantage of that to now take this technology forward, because nothing like a pandemic to prove that this is indeed worthwhile. Work from home, all of us have transitioned to work home. We have learned new skills. We have learned how to work out of our home. We didn't think we would be doing this, and the transition to digital goes hand in hand. And the transition to digital is very important. And as Anita mentioned to you already, I know this automatically changes what is a physical business into a digital business, and that's a huge opportunity. Now, if you're an academic incubator, you can actually work with our alumni anywhere in the world and provide them virtual incubation and things like that. You can provide training to mentorship to startups anywhere in the world, and all of you truly now become virtual incubators with a potential reach across the world. This is a good example of how a physical business has been transitioned to a digital business. Typically you would look at space, desks, and things like that, but now that is taken care of by the startup itself, by the entrepreneur, and their homes actually, or their workplace becomes the work area. But you connecting all these startups together to create a digital incubation, virtual incubation network. And there are many startups which have done this actually very successfully. One example is, before the pandemic, this business was only providing physical gymnasiums, actually, exercise area, exercise workout sessions and things like that in a physical gym context. And suddenly all the gyms were closed. So they transitioned to becoming a virtual gym, virtual workout sessions, etc. Created a digital app for doing that. And suddenly they found that they're now getting customers from outside the country, from US and things like subscribers from US, etc. They've gone back to the same revenue as before the pandemic, which was all physical, by using the digital means and things like that. So again, an example of how the resilience came through in this case. The online content business is also another example, and I won't go into that. But all of us now consume a lot of the content now online actually. And again, that's a good example of being at the right place at the right time and taking advantage of the opportunities that are provided by the pandemic in order to take advantage of the crisis, creating an opportunity out of a challenge. 2008 financial crisis, again, I won't dwell too much on that. Again, this is when I became the CEO of the company. 2007 is when I took over as CEO. We were doing very well, 36% growth. Next year, the entire world was turned upside down. As I said, 40% of our business comes from financial sector, and our business was severely impacted. Growth came down to 11%. The next year was 3%. So, it's just a crash. And we had to manage this crisis, manage to take care of the business, be profitable, and things like that. So again, how, you will find examples online, how we took care of the business during the pandemic, during the financial crisis. Now, robustness is the other side of this coin. It's being prepared, being ready, the ability to withstand and overcome adverse conditions or rigorous testing. So this is somebody else's faced these challenges, have figured out how to solve find a solution to problem, and how they can overcome them, etc. Now they have shared their experience, tools, techniques. So this is known, and based on this, you should plan and take preventive actions. Being prepared is very important, and this is the thing that you can do, because this is something under your control. Being prepared to face foreseen circumstances. Let me put it that way, and I'll explain some of the things as we go forward. Actually, how do you prepare yourself for adverse conditions and things like that? See, you should not make mistakes that are known. Known mistakes should not be repeated. First time you make a mistake, you may get forgiven. But second time you make the same mistake, you will not get forgiven, because now you should have anticipated this and taken preventive measures to never make that mistake again. And that is what I mean by this. And learning from others' mistakes is the best way to do this, because why do you have to make those same mistakes and learn, right? Learn from others' mistakes. And that's why robustness is very, very important. Now, in order to actually create a robust ecosystem, couple of things are very, very important. One is control over sales and customer relationships. I tell everybody, every business I meet, that there is one thing you cannot outsource, that is your sales or customer relationships, because that's the front end of the business. That's what drives everything behind. Every other activity is driven by sales. And if you don't have ability to forecast, ability to predict, ability to um, decide who your customers are and how you're going to serve, how you're going to create products and services to support this customers, you are not in control of your business. And if you're not in control of your business, then anything can happen, and you're not in control of your destiny. So control over sales and customer relationships are very important. And when it comes to an incubator, your customers are the startups, right? And it is very, very important to have a direct line, direct brand with respect to startups and things like that. You can't allow somebody else to give you startups to manage and things like that. You should be able to attract startups to come to you. You should have direct relationship with these startups and things like that. That is controlling your destiny. The more you are able to directly attract startups to come to you, the better your brand is, the better your ability to survive in difficult times. Similarly, lower fixed costs and higher variable costs in proportion to sales asset light models. And that's why, this hybrid model is going to be here. It will survive this pandemic, because that is actually a better model. It will lower your fixed costs, and you're creating asset light models, and that always is better. And take advantage of this, and create a virtual incubation model also. Other examples is, you know, um, on an everyday operational basis, you should make sure that you have sufficient cash to withstand crises. So, typically the crisis lasts 1 or 2 years, right? So, at Infosys, we always said that we must have sufficient cash to run the business for 2 years with no revenues. So 2 years of expenses should be there in the bank as cash, in order to make sure that the business survives, even if the worst um, you know problem happens to the business. Example of a you know uh, uh, example of how you will have sufficient cash to withstand crisis. Businesses fail most of the time because they run out of cash. Of course, they run out of cash because sales suffers. They run out of cash because expenses are too much and things like that. But ultimately, it's because they run out of cash, right? If you're able to get more grants, if you're able to get more investments, that is more cash into the business, of course you can survive, right? So having sufficient cash to withstand the crisis is extremely important. Corollary to that is, this is something that you manage on a daily basis. At Infosys, for example, one report as a CEO I would look at every single day is my accounts receivable. Am I collecting my money every day? What is my collection delay? Where is that delay happening? Is it because of a problem with my product, or the customer's inability to pay? Why did I then sell to this customer? All of those issues. I look at accounts receivable report on a daily basis to make sure that we keep control of this. We have cash in the bank always. The ability to innovate and create a pipeline of new products. This is again a skill that you need to create, and this is what all of you did, right? You innovated and created a virtual incubator model on the fly, right? This allows you to take advantage of the opportunities that come in front of you and repurpose your products to ensure that you have new products in these challenging times. Another example is personal health and immunity. If you look at who got affected very badly, these are people with comorbidities, people with other health problems and things like that. Suddenly, personal health and immunity, how resistant you are, how immune you are, how healthy you are, all became very, very important. And health consciousness actually went up during the pandemic. And many of my friends have become regular. I have become regular in my exercises. I've started eating right because I was aware that I have to be healthy. And this pandemic again reinforced this. These are all, things that you do to build robustness in your personal self, in your businesses and things like that. So robustness is how you prevent a pandemic affecting you badly, and resilience is the other side of the coin, where you have the capability to adapt and thrive during a pandemic. Now, you are all in the business of providing help to startups. So during the pandemic, you need to help them to minimize discretionary spending. You look at, should this expense be done during this time? Should you spend this money during this time? If not, cut it out, right? All unnecessary expenses are curtailed or made zero. You have to conserve cash so that you can increase the runway. Incur those expenses that will bring immediate revenue. So this is the repurposing part, right? Because when you repurpose, you'll have to do some R&D, you'll have to do some sales. Those expenses are okay to do because they will bring actually immediate revenue, transition from a physical gym to a digital gym, right? You have to spend the money to create the app, you have to spend the money to get the word across, so sales, etc. And that will bring immediate revenue and help you pivot the business to take advantage of new opportunities. You have to increase the investor confidence and funding. So typically it's your existing investors who will support you, not new investors. So rather than going after new investors, you go to existing investors, you go to your donors and say that, I've done well, I've repurposed, I've now going to survive, I'm helping my customers, my startups and things like that, and hence you must continue to support. From an investor perspective also, they want to protect their investment. They want to make sure that the likelihood of success or getting returns from the investment is increased. They don't want to lose money during a pandemic. So they will actually invest if they have confidence in you. And look for M&A and things like that. If worst comes to worst, rather than shutting down, try and see whether the startup can be acquired by another entity so that the product and all that work survives, the investors get some return rather than nothing. And from a incubator perspective, look to partner with other players in the ecosystem so that together you can do a better job, together you can survive or get embedded into a larger incubator such that everybody benefits. The startups that you incubate don't lose out during this pandemic, because that's the worst, right? Your own support system suddenly disappears. I will, this is the last slide. I will, talk about one model that Infosys developed, and we very early on, from the 90s, actually, we started running the business using what we call the PSPD model. So predictability of the revenues. I talked about, being in control of your destiny, right? So you must have predictable revenues. You must be able to plan for the next 5 years, what investments you need to make, how you need to expand, what services you need to have. All of this brings predictability into the business. Sustainability is the other side of this. How can you make sure that you create a sustainable business? So here the practices are like how much cash you have in the bank, how much are your accounts receivable, are you able to collect the money, are your products and services still relevant, do you have the right products and services to create a sustainable business. Profitability is very important because profit is what you reinvest and grow the business. So if you're not profitable, at some point you're going to die. because the grants are going to run out. The donors will say, enough is enough. They have not created a sustainable model, so I'm going to stop funding this. So making sure that you do generate profit is very, very important. And lastly, every single day you must look at what are the risks and how do you address those risks and how do you de-risk. This is the robustness that you need to create. Known mistakes don't repeat, and that's the de-risking part of the business. So that's the PSPD model, and easy to remember. Just think about PSPD model when you create an incubator, when you create a business, and I'm sure that you will survive. So in summary, incubators play a very, very important role in the ecosystem. These are the drivers of the future of the economy, because these actually help startups to be created, to grow, to scale, and to become the new businesses, new growth engines, new job creators of the economy. So incubator has to survive and provide support during the crisis. It has to be resilient. It has to handhold the startups that are incubated and even the ones that have graduated, to make sure that these survive and emerge stronger after the crisis. Robustness has to be by design and deliberate. You have to plan for robustness. You have to plan for the PSPD model that I talked about. Every aspect of the PSPD model you have to think about. That's what robustness is. And resilience ensures that you have the wherewithal to face unanticipated events, because they are going to occur, and probably they're going to occur more frequently in the future, unfortunately. The entity not just survives but thrives, and that's the key word: adapt and thrive. I think please remember that. This will give you the differentiation that is required. And look at these challenges, these crises, as opportunities to separate the stronger from the weaker. The strong will actually survive and do better in the long term. So I wish you all the very best. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. I believe we have now some time for Q&A. Over to you, Suresh. Thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing my video at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insights, and really it was highly helpful. You kept it simple, and parallelly we are able to compare what we are doing right now, the model that we have, and where the gap is. Thank you very much, sir. And as you said, we can have few questions, and I request the participants to raise their hand so that we can unmute, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask questions. Questions from the participants?
Suresh, if I can go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can introduce yes.
Right.
Ashish.
Thank you, Suresh. Mr. Gopal Krishna, thank you for wonderful insights. I think they are all pertinent. I just wanted to take one. I'm Ashish Jain from JSS Business Incubator Noida. Just wanted to take one clue from the presentation you made. Of course, I think I understood it wrongly, and that's why the clarification. You said PSPD model requires de-risking. Any business which I understand need to take risk to grow, and that is something which is in the genesis of great companies. This looks contradictory to me, so please give more light on this.
Sure. And thank you. And I hope I didn't confuse you with that statement. See, there are risks that are worth taking, because when you innovate, when you create a new product, etc., you are taking some risk, but you actually take measured risk, right? So for example, let me take the example of 3M, right? They had a metric which says that 1/3 of our products must be products that were introduced 3 years before, within the last 3 years. So they've already, they always renew their portfolio of products, which means that they have to spend that money. But this is part of their R&D budget. This is part of their budget and things like that. They're taking calculated risk, and their profit, etc., is considering these expenses. These are not unexpected, right? So when I talk about de-risking the business, what I'm talking about is actually looking at peripheral or environmental risk or things that are not part of the business. See, part of the business is creating new products. Part of the business is R&D. Part of the business is recruiting ahead of the demand. So these are all planned expenses, and you take the risk knowingly. Now, the risk that is to be considered is making sure that your brand doesn't take a hit, making sure that you have a plan if the business gets flooded, to work out of homes and things like that, or alternate size. You have a plan for if your computers get hacked, right? So when I talk about de-risking, it's those that are not part of your business, part of your
Still doing it.
revenue generating activities. It's very important to separate these out actually. This is the robustness that I talked about. I hope that's
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Suresh, if permitted, can I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, one very big challenge which we face in the incubator network is participation with corporates. There are many foreign-owned companies having captive centers in India, which are much more eager and willing to participate with incubators. But Indian companies have not taken that bandwagon as much willingly in India. Can you ascribe some reasons, because you have worked very closely with many of these corporates?
So this is something I keep telling them, and Suresh may have heard this from me before. I firmly believe that Indian industry must increase its investment in R&D, must increase its investments in new product development, must work with startups much more than they do today. See, innovation need not be homegrown completely from the inside. Innovation will have to be from the outside also. Some of the best companies, high growth companies, continuously acquire. And he talked about multinationals. Some of them do a better job than others. You just look at Byju's, right? How many acquisitions they have done in the last few years? And in my calculation, they have done 10 plus acquisitions in the last few years. Of course, it's still a startup, or still to be successful, but definitely they are acquiring. So we need to encourage our large companies, Indian multinationals, to work with incubators, to work with startups. We must encourage them to acquire these startups, integrate them with their business, etc. And I completely agree. I'm encouraging the CI members to look at startups and work with startups much more than they do today. The other thing I talked to industry leaders is that when you look at funding, also 90% of the funding beyond Series C today comes from overseas funds, right? Domestic funds are absent. So what happens? Our most successful startups become foreign, right? When the risks have come down, when you come to Series C, you've already crossed all the hurdles. You are actually in the phase of growth or scale, and at that point they become foreign-owned entities. Bulk of the investors are now overseas investors. And we are losing out in that sense. And again, I tell my peers in the industry that please invest in startups. Please put at least 15% of your investable funds into startups rather than just keeping it in the bank or keeping it in mutual funds or something like that, which is okay, but at least 15% must be invested in alternate assets in the startup ecosystem, etc. So one, increase your funding for R&D. Two, work with startups, in your industry, adjacent to your industry. And third, increase your funding to startups.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. I think, Suyos Sen, you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. Sir, you are talking about this in the help for startups, you are talking about mergers and acquisitions. So can you please explain how should a startup explore its opportunities through this process, and how should a startup go about this? And what are the opportunities in India available on this?
Yeah, so, majority of the startups get acquired. Their exit is through acquisition. Only very few go on to do an IPO and things like that. Very, very few. And so bulk of the startups exit through an acquisition. Now, how do you look at acquisition? So you actually look at the ecosystem, the environment to identify startups that are, or businesses that are in your area. So for example, healthcare, let's take healthcare, and you are in the diagnostics area. So which are the players in the diagnostics? So Wipro GE or GE Health or Siemens or Philips. These are the larger companies, and there are some other companies which are in the diagnostic space, right? So you must have a constant interaction with these companies, talk about your roadmap, where you are, etc. Because most probably that's the exit route you will take. And the same is true. So if you are in the manufacturing, the automotive space, you would talk to the large OEMs to see whether it makes sense for them to acquire them or make an investment in you and things like that. So this has to be a constant endeavor by the startup. It will typically be facilitated by the investors, because the VC funds are well networked. They know who all are the players in their space, and they will proactively actually pitch the startup to be acquired and things like that. And lastly, this is something the incubators must also be on the lookout. So if let's say you have 10 startups that you're incubating, create a matrix which says these are the large players in the space, and these are the smaller or medium-sized companies in the space, and proactively be in touch with them, give them updates on the startup, and at the right stage, you can pitch this idea to them to be acquired and things like that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Suresh, I'm Vinay Mehta. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Good evening, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. It's a very insightful discussion you're leading. I had a question that every Black Swan event will throw many unknowns to the society or the industry or the startups or the incubators. And as the number of Black Swan events, like you said, they're going to increase in future. So those number of unknowns are going to become knowns in future, right? Like this time we had the oxygen issue, we had the ventilator issue. So all these are now known issues, right? But I believe, every Black Swan event is also measured by the unknowns, which it will throw up. So in a way, you are saying that, robustness will help you
Yes.
take charge of those things, and then maybe with a certain dip for a certain time, but you can come out stronger, right? But
Right.
is there a way of preparing yourself beforehand for those unknowns? I mean, could we? I mean, like in the engineering, we have so many unknowns but we design our ships or buildings or other structures or systems to take care of those unknowns, right?
Right.
So is there a way to handle these things?
Yeah, that's the methodology I talked about, the PSPD model, which is you need to know your customers. Very, very important. And I can tell you that Infosys experience, even though our revenues came down, we did not lose any customers. And when things became better for our customers, they started spending more money with us, buy more of our products and things like that. So know your customer is extremely important. Second, being financially strong and having enough cash in the bank for facing unforeseen circumstances and things like that. So if you are an incubator, make sure that your you have enough money for the next 2 years. Keep that as the horizon, because typically you will be able to come out of challenges in 2 years time. Typically, there could be unforeseen ones, but have 2 years of runway ahead of you always, and keep track of that. So don't raise your funds at the last minute. Raise your funds well in advance. There is a saying in the startup ecosystem that when you need money, nobody will give you money. But when you don't need money, everybody is willing to offer you money, right? So what is the lesson from that? You actually raise your funds when you don't need it, right? So plan for that well in advance. Third is the ability to innovate on the fly, and this is a skill that you must have. Throw these challenges at your people every single day. Come up with every month. You say that we have a half a day, dedicated to come up with new ideas. You may not take them forward, but keep them engaged, keep them challenged, ask them to come up with innovative ideas every single month. And that is the culture that you want to create. Of course, 1 or 2 of them, you will take them forward and they may become new offerings for the future. So challenge your employees to, innovate, create a culture of innovation on an ongoing basis, create an opportunity for them to present to you, and the whole process of creating a business plan and things like that, I think will benefit you when a challenge comes. So there are many things that you can do to prepare yourself from a financial stability and strength perspective, from owning the customer relationship perspective, from creating a culture of innovation, entrepreneurship, etc., problem solving. So these are things that can be done. And that paranoia, as Andy Grove said, only the paranoid will survive, right? Be paranoid always, right? There is, even Sam Walton used to say, Walmart, right? He started Walmart at the age of 65. Walmart, he started at the age of 65. And he used to say that, every single day, I think that tomorrow will be my last day for the business. I'm so paranoid that I think every day is my last day, right? So I only do what is essential. I only look at what is absolutely important. I don't waste my time. I don't waste resources. I don't waste others' time and things like that. And that's the paranoia that you need to have. Sense of urgency you need to have. If something is good to be done, it has to be done yesterday. That must be the mindset that you should have.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And
can I ask
yes,
a question?
Yeah. Yeah, you can introduce yourself and.
Yeah, this is Dr. Vinod here.
Yeah. Vinod, just a minute, sir. We can take another 1 or 2 questions, sir. Is it okay for you?
Yeah. We can go up to maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Proceed, Dr. Vinod.
Yes, I am running my own venture studio here in Tirunelveli. I am also a CEO of an incubator here in National Engineering College, Koilpatti. One thing I wonder is, when we have a methodology like how to create startups. So during the initial phase, I do get co-founders and tell them. Always I tell Infosys an example of how 7 co-founders have joined together like 30 or 40 years back, and you've done an amazing job. But in the current scenario, it is very hard for me to do a an arranged marriage of getting two co-founders and getting a startup. So somewhere this is one of the issues. There are many issues startup face, but maybe we try to get two co-founders who complement each other, and we try to marry them. Am I right? So that's what's happening. But still, that is in fact 30% of the startups fail in our incubator due to co-founders issue, or there is no good match after some years, or one or two guys leave after probably like 2 years. So the other co-founders is in jeopardy. He don't know how to do it. So this is the issue. So, but how do you do that? I always give you as an example. Today I have, I have to thank the organizers. I am asking one of the co-founders this question.
Yeah, see, typically co-founders come together because they work together, they know each other, they're friends, and they trust each other. It's very important. If you create an arranged marriage, the likelihood of it falling apart, especially when the stress becomes too high, is very, very high, right? So arranged marriages in the area of startups typically fail. That's my experience actually. And if people's values and their goals are not aligned, again, it will fail. A clear example, we had a startup with 3 founders. After about 2 years, one of the founders said, I'm going to get married. Now, I can't take any more of this risk. I want a steady income. I want to go and find a job now. And he was the technical head of the group actually. And so the startup failed because the goals were not aligned. They need to know that, for the next 5 years, we have to somehow or other manage with the minimum salary that we are going to take and bootstrap the business, etc. Anyway, I have found that people who have worked together, who have trust in each other, who are friends, etc., make the best co-founders. You try and put together a team of strangers, it's a recipe for failure, and I wouldn't advise you to do that. Yes, we need, at least 2 people. We need to de-risk the startup phenomena, but don't artificially bring people together to do that. Other way to do that is to recruit that person, let that person work with the startup for maybe a couple of years. When you are comfortable, when he or she actually understands the business and everybody knows each other, then you make that person a co-founder. Don't bring him or her as a co-founder from day one. Take your time and build a team over the 2-3 year horizon.
Thank you, sir. Then maybe there's one question related to this. See, when we bring him or her as an employee, the first 2 years, again the problem is we want to pay that high-end salary. Am I right? We are bringing co-founder for a reason that we can give them equity and we can onboard them.
Give them equity, but let it vest over 3-4 years, and only see people who are committed you should bring, right? And give equity. People who are not committed, are not willing to sacrifice, should not be brought in as founders. So bring them as employees, key employees, give them equity, and over time make them co-founders.
May I ask one?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vinod.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, Gautam?
Yeah,
you can unmute yourself and you can.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. My name is Gautam Mukhopadhyay from Kolkata. I just wanted to ask that how do we bring, let us say, the business houses or let us say the incubators into getting into environmentally friendly initiatives, like for example, the plastic pollution. This is a major pollution these days. So how do we bring them so that they are interested to get into producing, let us say, biodegradable kind of plastics or products?
So this happens in multiple levels. As a society, as a government, we have now taken a stand saying that climate change is a important, important issue facing society, facing us as a country. We have taken India, we have taken now specific goals with respect to sustainability, climate change, and things like that. As industry, then we want to do that, and industry leaders. And if you look at Indian industry, all the large companies have come out with their own goals around sustainability. Many companies have said we will be carbon neutral, zero carbon companies over a time period and things like that. The IT services companies are, taking aggressive targets and things like that. Some of them are already, in the next 2-3 years will become carbon neutral, etc. But the challenge is in the MSME sector or the startup side. And this is where, we have to think about how do you fund this transition. See, the challenge comes from funding this transition, right? So we have to think about how can you help. So one thing that can be done is, these MSMEs become part of a supply chain of a larger organization. Can that larger organization now train, provide resources, provide support in order to transition the supply chain? There will be incentives from the government to make this transition. I also believe that this is a worthwhile cause that banks should finance, debt funding and things like that. So we need to look at various mechanisms to fund this. We need to create then mechanisms for knowledge transfer and technology transfer to these MSMEs. Don't have the internal capability, capacity, etc. to make this transition because they don't have the resources with the knowledge to make this transition, the technology needed to make. So there are several things that we can do as a society to transition this. See, India unfortunately is in 3 different time frames. One India is in the 19th century. That's the India that's dependent on agriculture. It's poor, it's not literate and things like that. The second India is dependent on manufacturing, daily labor. It's still struggling to make ends meet, etc., etc. This is the India, that just survives and just makes it, And then the third India is the India that's in the 21st century. That's the biotech industry, that's the IT industry. We have competitive industries that are world class, that's doing very well. So these are the companies that are actually aggressively, meeting the targets and things like that, or exceeding the targets, giving leadership to industry globally. So we need to slowly, carry everybody along. Unfortunately, this is something that's unique to India, that we live in 3 different centuries as parts of India, and each of these is bigger than some of the majority of the countries in the world in terms of population and things like that. So it will take time for us to make this transition, but I'm optimistic that over the next 20-30 years, India will become a middle income country. India will become a $10 trillion economy, and we will be transformed by that time.
Thank you so much, sir.
One last question, if any of the members.
Yeah, really the last question.
Yes. So if there's no questions from the members, but I received a message about a question to be asked to you, sir. Then just reading out it. With the diversified background of ecosystem stakeholders around the incubators, which reflect in the profile of aspirants' expertise and resources, what is your suggestion to enhance the performance of the incubators?
So, incubator is a business, right? Just like other businesses, you need to look at, how do you serve your customers better? How do you help them succeed? And measure your success by the success of your customers, which is the startups. So that's the first thing to do. Measure your success by the success of your customers. Second is making sure that you're financially strong, right? That's very, very important. Take care of, the funding and things like that. Third is, making sure that you stay focused, even in a diversified environment. Staying focused is very important. Nobody can become everything to everybody. That's a recipe for success. Differentiation, uniqueness, specialization, depth in knowledge, depth in set of services. All of these things are very, very important because you have limited resources, and that limited set of resources must be managed properly to provide the best solution to your startups and things like that. That means specialization, that means focus, that means depth of knowledge and things like that. So, these are things that you need to do. So diversified ecosystem, but don't diversify yourself. Stay focused.
Okay. Thank you,
you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I request Dr. Balchandran, the Vice President of the ISBA and also the Senior General Manager of IIT TB Vellore, to give the official vote of thanks. Over to you, Bala.
Thank you, Suresh, and thank you, Mr. Chris, for this wonderful session. So it's always a pleasure from ISBA to interact with you, whether it is the CIS report on performance of academic incubators or even the Center of Excellence initiative which you are spearheading. So it has been a wonderful evening with you, and you covered a wider ground, starting from the Black Swan events. While most of us were focused on the pandemic, but you brought in a new perspective. It's beyond that, and given a lot of insights about the emerging threats or challenges, and also with the prescriptive resilience and robustness to finally even empathetic support to startups in the incubation is a very, very nice way of articulating. I think it will go a long way. You also prescribed from your own Infosys experience, the PSPD model. So all this, I think it's quite relevant to the situation we are facing, and it will help us to introspect based on these messages. And thank you for spending your valuable time, and also take this opportunity to thank Dr. Anita Gupta for being with us and supporting in all our initiatives, and also continuously adding value to both the incubators and the startups in the country. And so thank you all the participants for your active engagement. I think we'll have more such sessions in the offering. Have a nice evening.
Final thank giving from my side as well. So enough takeaways, and I think this will give them enough insights, the incubator fraternity and also the startup ones, to how to really adapt and thrive. So thank you.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you all very much. Bye.